Yo, what's happening, all you folks out there
Fuckers.
in the Black Army Radio realm? Welcome back, or if you're new here, welcome to the movement. Before we get started, if this show's ever made you laugh, think, cuss, swear, yell, cry, feel any kind of way, give us a 5-star rating. We appreciate it. Helps a lot more than you know. Whatever episode you think's worth a damn, one of these investigations that we have or interviews, we got some interviews coming up. I'm looking forward to. Got some dudes and chicks lined up. Send one of those episodes to a friend. Really appreciate that too. All that stuff helps a lot. And before we get to it today, a few things we're going to talk about. We are going to talk a little bit about the news and some other stuff that everybody really, really enjoys so much in this dicked up world that we're kind of living in right now. And after that, we're going to get into part three of kind of our history deal that we were talking about. Flood memories and cultures and megalithic structures and ancient societies. We're going to do, this week we're going to be talking about what was here before the flood, presumably, possibly, based on mythology, before the flood, and why it had to go. But before that, we're going to do a little housekeeping, Joel. We're going to do a little housekeeping, man. I just got back from Montana, bro. And we had our annual yearly ranger reunion. So me and some of the boys and the families, the wives and the kids and everything else. And dude, just like I talked about before, man, it's harder and harder, bro. Harder and harder to come back from stuff like that. And it's the most tribal we get, dude. The kids are like Lord of the Flies out there. You know, we're swimming in the lakes, doing like having campfires, howling at the moon. Man, I'll tell you what, dude, it was a hell of a time. We had a hell of a time up there. We're up there for 3 or 4 days and just a hell of a time. But also, dude, you know these Eat Wolf hats right here? These ones here, can you see it? You know, the Eat Wolf hats that are super duper prominent in Routt County, South Routt. This hat, dude, I bought a hat for everybody and their like wives, and I left them on the goddamn plane. I left them on the plane, bro. Each hat was like $25. I bought like 10 of them. Dude, I couldn't believe it, man. And it's like more than that. It's just funny. It's like such a funny hat to me. And bro, I was crying. I was like devastated. I didn't get these guys these hats because they would have appreciated it so much, man. I couldn't believe it. I was so bummed out, bro. So bummed out. How are you doing, man?
It's a fucking, I'm good. It's the worst when you do something and it's like your own will. Like you can't blame it on anybody else. You can't pass the buck. Like I was flying to Mexico and I was so worried about losing my passport that I lost my fucking wallet. So I got to Mexico and I wore a pair of like wind pants with a zipper and like dressed like super airport friendly so I wouldn't lose shit. And I left my wallet in a connecting flight in California at the John Wayne Airport. And I had a friend of a friend, luckily, who I called the airport and they're like, well, we can't ship it back to you. We do have your wallet, but you have to hire a carrier service. And I was looking at all these carrier services and their like minimum was like $200 to do anything. And I had a friend who lived out in California and they went and picked up my wallet. But in that experience, I was like kind of trying to pass the buck, be like, oh, my mom distracted me because it was a family trip. So there was a bunch of commotion when we were leaving and getting on the plane. But really, it was my own fault. And I hate it when it's my own fault.
Dude.
And I don't hate it. I'm fine with taking accountability, but it might take me a couple shots to be like, oh, okay, that's on me.
Are you?
But yeah, I'm good. I've been crazy trying to buy a house. We had our appraisal got messed up on a typo and they were like, oh, your house isn't appraising for what it's worth. So we started redoing all this loan stuff and figuring out if we still want to buy the house, because if it's not appraising for what it's worth, they're only going to give you the loan for what it appraises for. And then 4 days later, after we sent our lender and everybody in commotion and started talking, like almost kind of blew up on my real estate agent. And then it was all based on a typo. I wish I could fuck up like a big important document and have like $100,000 typo and just be like, my bad. Sorry for the stress, guys. But yeah, it's been
We'll get it
wild.
back.
But
We'll get it
was my
right the next
birthday
time.
last
We'll
week.
get it right the next. Don't worry.
Yeah, that is exactly what they said. Well, as long as everything's okay when we're closing. And I was like, you're like taking $30,000 in our like scheme of money, and it's like one day like, oh, we have $30,000 left over from a sale of a house to put into our other house, and then the next day, oh, you have no money. It's confusing, and you want to get mad at people, but they're all everyone's trying to do their job, but it's frustrating when things are so tight, because trying to buy a house right now and not be cash poor, and that's what we don't want to do, is we want to make sure we have some money left over from the sale of her house, to invest. And it's so hard it's stressful. And this is, it's not like it used to be. This house in Yampa and
it's not even just being cash poor.
It's
being home poor too.
Yeah, well, cash poor, home poor. Yeah, that's exactly. And then you're stuck to like taking out a HELOC loan or another loan to, like it's not. And then the interest rates are fucking
these days
keep climbing. They're supposedly going to rise 3 more times this year.
It's hard not to get over. And it's hard not to get over your head, bro, because I mean, like, it's hard not to be house poor with your payments. Because I mean, dude, here we're at, like, we are a little bit for sure. I mean, we're, the 5 kids, we need the bigger place and bigger space. And it's like, oh, dude, it's like, so we see how much we're coming out when it comes to the mortgage. We're like, God, yeah, there goes the baseball camp. There goes the kids' volleyball camp. There goes the football camp. Like, we're not going to sorry, can't do that. We got to have a house to live in. Man, also speaking of that, dude, and your house thing, I hope you get it worked out and all that stuff, and it works out in your favor, and all that paperwork is done correctly, and the interest rate isn't killing you or whatever. Because interest rates are still pretty high, especially compared to how they were like 10 years ago plus. But dude, we just had the boys, they just won the minor league championship, bro. And it was like the first time ever that a kid, like the minors baseball team from South Route had won the league championship, from my understanding. My daughter had won it once, like 5 years ago, but she was the rookie league. It's like just ahead of T-ball. It's pretty, but man, that was, dude, just the coolest. Dude, the boys like pitched their ass off, hit their ass off, caught their ass off. They played so freaking good, dude. They just played so damn good, dude. I was so freaking proud of them. I mean, like, it was so cool. All these kids that worked so hard, like, and their parents, dude, after the game was over, they literally stayed at the baseball field for 2 hours, bro. 2 hours. Parents, kids, just hanging out at the baseball field, throwing the ball around, running around the grass, eating pizza. Like, dude, they got big old championship rings, like big rings, dude. Championship rings. It was just, so cool, man. A lot of hard work. Anybody who listens to this podcast hears me talk about baseball a lot. So it's like a lot of hard work, dude. It was just cool. It was cool for the boys to see them that happy and elated and that cool, man. So just awesome. Dude. How you feeling about our political situation right now, currently, Joel? Like, what's going on currently, dude? How you feeling about
it? Well, for the 25th time in a year, we have won the Iran war. Fucking, as long as Trump's saying it will be a unanimous win, as long as Iran opens up the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran is not opening up the Strait of Hormuz. And if they are opening up the Strait of Hormuz, they're going to be charging ships that have any American ties a bunch of money. So,
dude, Iran just came out with its core demands.
Gas prices is still high.
They just came out with their core demands. $4 an average, a gallon, and is average still. And I think that's going to be like the new norm, dude. I really think this administration is going to try to make that the new norm. I think they're going to kick the can down the road for Iran. They're going to keep doing these little pinprick things. Also, all this information coming out. Dude, we've been talking about this, you and I, for months and months, actually, about how low our interceptor supply is and our like Tomahawk supply and everything. And for those of you out there, it takes 3 or 4 years to make one freaking Tomahawk missile. And it's like $350 million like per missile. And that's like 3 or 4 years for that production. They're like, warfare has moved so far past that kind of shit. Like, you know, the big aircraft carrier. I mean, if we get into a big ass thing with China or Russia, I mean, maybe that comes into play again, dude, but I don't know. I mean, but Iran just came out with their demands because once again, they're saying they're not negotiating because Trump, dude, this guy, dude. Oh, how many times we got to hear him say they're demanding to negotiate?
Well,
they're demanding it. They want to, dude, he came out. What did he say? He said they were going to do the biggest assault since World War II. The biggest American military assault since World War II. And Iran called him on the phone, desperate for them to make a deal. And then he's so full of shit that Iran I think this was today, actually, came out with these core demands. Number one, stop threatening Iran and insulting its national or religious values. 1. 2, end the war and attacks on Iran and its regional allies permanently. Number 3, lift the U.S. naval blockade and withdraw naval and air forces from the area permanently to include all their military bases that were there before. Next one, 4 of it, I guess. Pay full war damages and reparations to Iran without reduction. 5, lift all economic and trade sanctions against the Iranian nation. Next one, release all frozen and held assets of the Iranian people unconditionally. And then after that, guess what? We're still controlling the Strait of Hormuz. And the funny thing about this is, dude, is at the beginning of this war, nobody knew what the fuck the Strait of Hormuz was. Nobody knew. Nobody heard of it. Nobody could spell it. Nobody could find it on a map. Nobody could do anything with it because nobody had heard of this shit because that was never an important aspect of this war at the beginning. It was all nuclear material. We can't have Iran have a nuclear weapon because they were 2 weeks away for the 100th time since 1992 for having a nuclear weapon. And we had to replace their regime. And now it's about opening the Strait of Hormuz free for commerce. Somehow that's it. Crazy.
Well, and the fucked up thing is like what we're doing with our, like the oil situation. So he took all our excess crude, our reserved crude, right, and essentially sold it back to the oil companies so they could sell it at a higher price of what oil is priced now. And the whole thing with our excess crude, that's something that's paid by taxpayers. So essentially it's like laundering money. And this is like this isn't from me. I'm reading this from one of the guys I follow, or he shows up on my feed sometimes, but he explained it pretty well. So Trump is handing our nation oil reserves to his mega donors while we are getting crushed at the pump. The administration has handed out 133 million barrels of crude oil loans from a strategic petroleum reserve to 13 massive corporations, 10 of which have direct political connections to Trump. We expose how the donors and the companies like Exxon, BP, Kelly Warren Energy transferred this risk-free access to public taxpayer-paid oil and to make billions while families are paying anywhere between $4 and $4.50 a gallon. You know, and that's the whole thing. Like how that should be going directly back into our oil reserve to lower our cost of oil, but instead he loaned it back to the oil companies and they're selling it at the price which oil is at now. So it's essentially like laundering money back and forth as we get fucked. You know, when that oil reserve should be going straight to the pumps without us paying for it because we already paid for it as taxpayers. You know, when it's fucked up.
Mm-hmm. And so it's on top of that, our oil reserves are like the lowest since the 80s because of this. And it's artificial. This is manufactured. It's like, this isn't real. And it's like our oil reserves are severe. It's just like our munition systems that I was just talking about, right? The interceptors, Tomahawks, all that stuff. And it's like, supposedly Trump and Hegseth had it out or something. The overloaded like weapon supplies, because they've had to call this thing off a bunch of times, man, because they can't keep, like, we've like exhausted the majority of our surplus. And not only that, but we've exhausted a lot of our oil reserves that are in our own country to keep our shit artificially low.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And it's like, dude, it's scary, man. And this was leading, like we were talking about before. You got, who's the guy in Minnesota. So we've seen it in Colorado. We've seen it in New York State, right? Where we have these social democrats that lean more into the socialist realm of things, but that usually wouldn't have a prayer in hell of getting elected or getting a nomination, especially over an establishment politician that has $30 million behind him. But that freaking guy, his name's Abdul, give me a second. Abdul Alahim or something. Shit. I can't remember his damn name now.
Was it Michigan or Minnesota?
His first name's Abdul. Michigan. And Al Said, I think it's Abdul Al Said.
Yeah.
He's got a longer name than that, but he's narrowed it down to that. But dude, he just ousted the establishment Democrat that had like $30 million of AIPAC money behind him and everything. And now he's going to be facing against Mike Rogers, who's the Republican who got elected in Michigan when Trump got elected. And bro, I think he's gonna beat the shit out of that Mike Rogers guy in Michigan. It's got one of the biggest Muslim populations that there is. And you're getting people that voted for Trump, dude, and voted Republican 2 years ago that are now turning around and voting for social democrats, man, because they see the lies and the lack of action for the American people. And that's a huge swing, dude. That Abdul Al-Said guy, I listened to some of his stuff. Dude, he is wildly eloquent, very intelligent, really quick on his feet,
Yeah.
because a lot of these reporters, especially in these mainstream outfits, even the Democratic leading, like CNN, MSNBC types, like they don't like him because he's a social democrat and because he's Muslim. And so they didn't want him to get the nomination. And so they're even bagging on him. But he'll be on those networks, dude, and he's toe to toe with these guys. He's young, he's wildly intelligent. He's a good looking guy. Like, he's very presentable. It reminds me a lot of when Obama first kind of came in and started taking over and nobody knew who the hell he was. And it's like, I see that with this guy. I mean, Obama was like a one-term senator when he ran for president, dude. This guy, he's an American citizen. He is not from the Middle East. He's just Muslim of faith. And you got these retards like freaking Nancy Mace, who's posting on X saying stuff I'm like regurgitated from 2002. That basically any Muslim that gets elected into American office is a Trojan horse for Sharia law or the downfall of the empire or some shit like that. And it's like, dude, the younger generation isn't listening to that shit. That is boomer slop right there. Like, we don't care about that. That's not, people aren't worried about that kind of stuff anymore, man. They're not. And they're really guessing what we've done in the Middle East for the last 20 years. And they're even, and 9/11. They're second guessing the reality of 9/11 too. Like, that shit's not going to scare people away, bro. Fucking not.
Yeah. They don't. It's well, and I think a lot of people who take any time read through that. You know, I mean, and this is back from World War II and the history before World War II against the Jews, and they had a really shitty plight. But I think what's happened in Gaza the last 4 years, and if you have any sort of like looking outside of your mainstream media, like, you understand that Israel is not, some may say not any better than a Muslim country, but to me, it's all the same. We've been fighting these holy wars and religious wars for fucking ever. And one points a finger at the other and says the other is bad. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of people have saw through that shit. And if we're going to be if we're going to be electing politicians who are taking money to fund wars, and I mean, just what's happened this last year with Israel and how we have interwoven our governments. And there's so many business deals on the top end of this that we don't even know about. Like when it comes to AI, flock cameras, there was another company that their selling point was that they could change live feed security camera data. So they could like change an actual live feed security recording in real time to like make it look like something else happened. Know who they're tied with? Palantir. Know who paid for all their stuff and tied into them was Israel's former minister, not Netanyahu, or maybe it's the one who is now. It was Epstein's handler. I forget his fucking name. But they're in bed with a company that is literally saying like we could change real-time security footage, and it's just like, and I think it was over. It was $1 billion deal that's not even being talked about, and it's just the more of the interweaving of Palantir, the security state, all these AI companies with Israel, and that's why like that region is so important, because they already had big data centers in that region because no one gives a fuck about what's being built there, you know? And that's why like this is like that's why Palantir started in Israel, because they knew they weren't going to get the pushback from the people about any of the data centers, anything like that, you know? And it's just, I mean, if we our fucking amendments
that
going to be stomped on
was,
repetitively, and then ties into the flock cameras, everything else.
Yeah, that's another thing that Iran talked about too, man, was part of their talking points was Gaza. Like we talk about a lot of this stuff, and it's like, yeah, obviously the AI stuff, the data centers, the flock cameras, everybody's really pissed off about that. It's glorious to see the rise up nationally against flock cameras. I love seeing it, I'm not gonna lie. Like the surveillance state, all this stuff. But really, dude, what's shifted, 100% love it. What really shifted public opinion with Israel was Gaza. And one of Iran's talking points that they just take out when they said that the United States and Israel stop attacking their, the neighbors overseas. They're talking about Lebanon. They're talking about Gaza. They're talking about those entities specifically. And so you get a lot of people, man, there is a huge sympathetic bone out there in the American populace for Iran. And it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Because the American population as a whole is not down at all with what's happening in Gaza. I mean, they just hit a freaking wedding party, dude, where a girl was blown up so badly that her fetus was left on the ground. The guy who was going to be the husband was in the tent. He got smoked. Like the whole wedding party got smoked. Pregnant gal was blown up so bad that her fetus was blown out of her and was like on the ground in the middle of the street. I mean, dude, people are like, you can't sell this shit anymore. Like maybe to the older 80-year-old, 70-year-old American population that just, for whatever reason, eats it up. And it's not all of them. But it is that generation that eats it up more than any other generation. Well, and it's like, dude, it's the same thing. Like even you're seeing it with the rise. It's like Mandami and this Abdul al-Sahid guy. And it's like, dude, it is trickling down to the younger American populace that issue right there, and us funding this shit and continue to fund it. And Israel Bell is basically telling us to shove it up our asses, which they pretty much do. And all of our politicians are like, Roger that, we'll shove it up our ass. No problem. I mean, dude, we're just not having it anymore as a populace. And it's leading to some massive swings, bro. Massive national political upheavals, big time. And I see like this guy Abdul, bro, I'm calling it, man. I'm gonna call it right now, bro. On this right now, I bet you if he runs for fucking president, if he wins the midterms against Mike Rogers, I think his name is, I think he's gonna crush Mike Rogers. I do. And Mike Rogers is gonna have a hell of a lot more money than him. I wouldn't be surprised, bro. Think about Barack Obama. It was like, he did not have any political experience. Well, he was young. He was eloquent. He was rational. He was intelligent when he spoke. I didn't agree with the vast majority of his policies, but what I'm talking about is election viability and where the populace is right now. And I see that Abdul guy, man, and I see him being really, really viable in a couple of years. If you're conservative out there, you better get your head out of your ass and start thinking about these outcomes a little bit more. Because 100% that guy is coming for the presidency. 100%.
Well, and I think the Democrats are so they don't know what the fuck they're doing, like they don't know who's running for president. It seems very disorganized. I think they're kind of waiting for the midterms to see what happens during the midterms, kind of like you said, to see if he wins out to, prop up the next guy. And it's tough because we were talking about this before the podcast, and
I don't think it's going to be up to the DNC.
like
anymore.
I was reading. No, I know. I agree, but I think we're a couple elections out of having like a viable third party. I think until there's a little more coming together as a group of people, because I was reading a thing on NPR and it was talking about how a lot of people are fed up with the establishment in the Democrat and Republican Party, and it's a time for the third party. And I think the biggest thing is a lot of the people who are promoting this are the outcasts from their party. And it's getting like if Marjorie Taylor Greene ran on an independent party, getting Democrats to lean into her or vice versa. And I think like the only way I see it happening and working is if we have like a Massey, Roa Khan, some sort of union where you have people from both sides that will get the left or the right leaning independent to vote for one or the other, and if I really see it not working if that doesn't go that way, just because the division in this country is so thick, like and it might work eventually. Yeah. But I think right now, like you said, it would just be taking away votes. It'd be splitting votes. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a growing pain that we need to go through as a country if we really want to get rid of the RNC and DNC, or at least not give them so much power when it comes to elections. But it's going to be an interesting next.
I think
with the midterms and the next election is going to be really interesting to see.
I don't think it's one new party.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's two parties because I think the left is definitely fracturing. Yeah. Definitely fracturing. All these guys, the Mandanis, the Abdul guy in Michigan, the gals that were just elected in Colorado, all social democrats. That's a huge split. And then on the right, you got, they just had a meeting of the minds with Marjorie Taylor Greene, freaking Joe Kent, Tucker Carlson. I think Thomas Massey was there, and they're talking about standing up another party. I mean, the best thing that could happen to this country is we stand up another party on the kind of, I guess you'd say, right, and another party kind of, I guess you'd say, on the left, because I think that's what makes it a lot more viable. Because if it's predominantly on the right side with, like, I guess you'd say Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Joe Kent, those guys, whatever, it's going to split the Republican vote. It's going to be like Ross Perot in the 90s, right? When Clinton won. And it's going to be the same thing on the left. And so I see it splitting on both sides. Like I could easily see, in the next 6 years, right. 6 years, maybe 8 years, something like that. And things are happening fast, dude. Just think about how fast everything happened with fucking Israel, dude. I mean, like literally a year and a half, bro. Less time than that. I mean, right. Well, probably a little bit around that. Actually, probably a little bit more than that. Cause I mean, October 7th was, more than that a time ago. And they've been crushing Gaza ever since then. And the wheels of change started turning quickly when they were attacking Gaza. And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse, especially with all this shit in Lebanon. And they're killing Christians like crazy too out there. And as we talked about before, Christians, Christians, like these are actual Christians that like are descended from Christians that lived during the time of Jesus in that same area. Like, hello. I mean, I know they're not American Christians, but it's like, I mean, we're in an interesting, shit's moving fast. And geopolitically, shit doesn't move fast historically. Yeah. It just doesn't. And it is. We got one more minute, homie, and I'm jumping into this thing. Let's just put a bow on this sucker. And then we're jumping into the flood and how we got there.
Just real quick, and this is something that we were talking about earlier when I was talking about like interest rates. So the average mortgage payment in Colorado in 2012 was $998. Right now, like I'm looking at a monthly payment of like $2,700 almost. And that's why like something needs to change. You can't afford to start a family, buy a house, and pay almost $3,000 a month to fucking live in it, in a house that is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath fucking house. That is so crazy to me. And anyways, I just wanted to bring
once
that
again,
point
while the
up.
younger generation,
and that's only like
pushing
that's a
back so
pretty
hard,
small
bro.
time frame. There's never
And then on
been
top
such
of
a
that,
gap.
yeah, huge gap for a very small time frame, like you said. And on top of that, like electric bills, gas. Like you live in Yapa, you're 45 minutes from Steamboat, 40 minutes from Steamboat, dude. You go in there and work in there, dude. You're talking a shit, especially if you're driving a truck. You're filling that bitch up 3 times a week for sure. And then it's like you can't get a goddamn wood burning stove anymore, right?
Right.
It's like you used to be able to heat your house with the wood burning stove, and it's like if you're not grandfathered in now with the wood burning stove, where you can just cut your own damn firewood, your electric bills are like, especially if you got kids, dude, and you're heating a big house, man, and like you got a water heater and all this other shit, you're looking at a $300 a month easy, more than that during winter electric bill. And so it's like it's not just the $2,700 a month house payment. Like you got to, it's all of it. It's all of it, bro. That's why we were saying before, like the American dream is fucking dying, and it's dying quick. It's not just on its knees. Like it's down for the count right now. I think down for the count right now. That's why you got all these younger generations going out there with sawzalls cutting down plot cameras, because it's like their Tea Party, dude. It's like their representation of throwing tea in the harbor is cutting down those plot cameras, because they represent an intrusive form of government that they no longer agree with, no longer adhere to, and no longer have allegiance to. Just the fucking truth.
Well, and I hope every conservative, Democrat, anybody who voted for any sort of this stuff, whether it was like what's happened in the last year to our privacy of Americans, is Google just got sued for fucking listening to conversations without permission. So typically, like if you say into a Google AI, you say like, Google, can you tell me who did this? They were listening to everything, and this didn't even make the fucking news. And it's like I think like $160 billion lawsuit or something like that, like crazy big fucking lawsuit. And all these companies are doing it. Palantir tried to merge with, what are the Lyft and Uber, so they could take your data while you're in the car, you know, and these are things what should be in the news, and none of this shit is reported. Like our privacy, our lives are getting inundated.
Nobody listens, watches the news
as we
speak.
They get
their information.
You know,
we're talking about it.
It's fucked up.
That's it. That's the only way you're going to find out about this shit, is by listening to shit like this. That's fucking it. And that's all, bro. You know? And I mean, like, how many cops too? How many cops are getting busted using flat cameras, stalking people? Old girlfriends, wives. There was just this chick detective who was in Florida who was just busted and canned, and because she was stalking her husband's ex-wife. And it's dude. I mean, bro. I love to see the little bit of rebellion. We need it. And with that being said, you need a little bit of rebellion in your society, Joel. You need it. You need to have a little bit of pushback, man, to know that the blood's still flowing, bro. I can still see the blood flowing in the younger generation. It's starting to flow hot. It's dangerous. It's like we said, we're in a dangerous time. We don't get a handle on this shit, people. That's how these things work. And so, anyway, with that being said, the Watchers, what was here before the flood and why it had to go. We're now getting into this. This is episode 3. This is the third part of our series that we kind of did for the last couple episodes. And so if you're just listening to this one for the first time, I highly recommend, especially if you're into ancient history and biblical stuff and cultures and mythology, go back 2 episodes. All right. So episode 1 of this 2 episodes ago opened with aperture on the archaeological anomalies that we talked about, mainly all the megalithic structures out there from Peru to Egypt to India to freaking the Americas to everything else. Okay, episode 2, the last one, walked through the flood memory across 100 different cultures. The big flood memory that we have that doesn't just belong to Christians and doesn't just belong to the Bible. This episode here that we're doing right now turns to the question the 2 previous episodes kind of leave you hanging on. And that was what was here before the flood, possibly. What was here before the flood? who was here, what did they build, and why, according to every ancient tradition on earth, did God or the gods decide that it all needed to be wiped out through a deluge, which was the flood. Okay. The 4 key sources that we're pretty much going to be examining while we're going through this thing. All right. Number 1, the Book of Enoch. Expelled from most biblical canons, but preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, the Ethiopian Bible. If you're out there, you're a Christian, and you aren't using the Ethiopian Bible, you're not doing yourself a favor. Use the Ethiopian Bible, because it has all the other books too, but it has a bunch of other books that were intentionally excluded, basically within the Council of Nicaea, and not put in the biblical canon, which is kind of amazing, honestly, because Enoch was like
real quick too,
or great grandfather. Go ahead.
Right. From my understanding, the 2 most major books were the Book of Enoch and the Book of Mary, and like the people who are saying like these they don't belong in Christianity, their argument is that these books were never part of a Bible. They were part of a Gnostic group of Christians who wrote these books. But really, there was large groups of people who believed in both of those books. And when in the Council of Nicaea, when Christianity was consolidated for like the first time, they removed those books. And if you look at the 2, especially those 2 that they removed, it goes against the narrative of God, of like how they portray God. You know, it was talking about, and I've talked about this a little bit before, like the Book of Enoch, you know a lot more about. I know a little bit more about the Book of Mary, or maybe not as much as you, but I personally know more about the Book of Mary. And that was talking about like Jesus is within yourself. You're not worshiping anything. You find Jesus within your own soul. It gave women a little more leverage, and they weren't so much as a tool, but they had equal importance as a male, you know, and all those things fit against the narrative of what Christianity became, you know, and along with Enoch, with like the Watchers and Nephilim, all those things go against like God being the almighty powerful one, and he did all of this, because Enoch says like you had the Nephilim and you had the angels, you know, like the
fallen angels. Yeah.
Oh, I can't.
The interesting thing about
you
Enoch,
know what I'm saying, and it's.
Oh yeah, 100%. The thing that really is interesting about Enoch is mentioned, and why it doesn't really make sense is it was excluded. Especially the first book of Enoch, is it's mentioned in the Bible a lot. Like Enoch himself is mentioned in the Bible. The stuff that he describes is mentioned in Genesis when he talks about the Nephilim, like the fallen angels, like everything. A lot of stuff that it also goes into a lot more detail on the flood. It goes into a lot more detail on the giants and the Nephilim. It goes into a lot more detail on the fallen angels. It goes into a lot more detail on the covenant the angels made, basically when they decided they wanted to lay with human wives, you know, and procreate and stuff like that. And it's strange because also in the Book of Enoch, if you really investigate it, like up until the Council of Nicaea, it was used a lot, and it was used before Jesus' time. It was referenced. It was considered a book, like it was a book Jesus would have known. Jesus would have known the Book of Enoch very, very well, for example. And it had been in Aramaic, which would have been in his native tongue pretty much. When he was in Israel, he would have been speaking Aramaic. And at that time primarily, and it was in Hebrew as well, but it was referenced. It was a known, you know, it's not known to us now. It's kind of getting reinvented now, not reinvented, I should say, but rediscovered. But during that time, bro, the first, you know, probably at least, God, I mean, for thousands of years before Christ, and then for at least a couple hundred years after Christ, the Book of Enoch was not considered an outside source of any kind of, like, whether monotheistic or, you know, single God belief structure, or like a polytheistic belief structure, which is multiple gods. And that kind of the big problem with the Book of Enoch was the Book of Enoch kind of has a polytheistic feel to it, where it's almost like many gods rather than one singular God. And that was really the big problem with the Book of Enoch, because it wasn't talking about, and it wasn't talking necessarily about like Yahweh or whoever of not being the God of gods. It doesn't say that. But what it does give It gives a lot of power to the angels, a lot of power to the angels that descended. Okay. And that is where the heresy kind of comes in, because it's like the heresy of these angels, in a way, at least in that ancient belief, when they were putting the canon together for the Bible in those first couple hundred years after Christ, it just seemed like the angels had too much power, and it felt more like a polytheistic feel. You know what I mean? Where you could almost worship the angels individually because they were teaching metallurgy and cosmetics and astronomy and weapons building and like all this different stuff, science, a lot of scientific stuff and language and writing. And because of that, they had too much of a polytheistic feel, and it didn't attribute enough power and authority to the one true God, right? Which is more of the monotheistic feel, where you have just a singular God. But anyway, we're going to get to that shit, Joel. We're going to get to it.
Right.
All right. So like I said, the Book of Enoch, expelled from most biblical canons, but preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, the Ethiopian Bible. Like we said, get one of those. If you're really into reading cool ancient history, get the Ethiopian Bible, trust me. It describes the Watchers, 200 angels who descended to Mount Hermon. They took human lives and taught humanity forbidden knowledge. It's going to sound a lot like the knowledge from the fruit from the forbidden tree of good and evil, right? The tree of knowledge. It was very similar to that in the Book of Enoch. All right. But it's not talking about, that's another thing, Joel. The Book of Enoch doesn't talk about the fruit of the forbidden tree as being one tree with one apple that a human bit and then had knowledge that they weren't supposed to have. That knowledge, according to Enoch, came from the fucking fallen angels, not from the tree of knowledge.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so that is another thing that kind of disrupts the ancient monotheistic tradition within the Old Testament. All right. You have Genesis 6 in the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament, which describes the same event basically in condensed form and identifies the Nephilim as the giants who resulted. So Genesis is a very, 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 very condensed version of basically a lot of the stuff that happens in the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch goes into way, way, way more detail on all of that stuff. Number 3 of my 4 key sources, the Sumerian Kings List and the Apkallu traditions. Some of these words are going to be tough, Joel. All right. The Apkallu traditions, which describes 8 pre-flood kings ruling for tens of thousands of years each, and 7 divine sages sent to civilize humanity. It's going to sound a lot like the angels, like the 200 fallen angels. Another one, the 4th basic source we're going to be looking into, is the parallel traditions across cultures, the Hindu culture, the Greek culture, the Native American culture, all right, and other cultures as well, describing giants and divine teachers who preceded the current human age that we live in now, pre-flood, all right? The framing that pulls it all together, what happens when you read the Watchers is pre-modern encounter with non-human intelligences. What happens when you read that? The forbidden knowledge they taught, which was basically metallurgy, weapons making, cosmetics, sorcery, astrology, the reading of the stars, root cutting, which goes to medicine and poison as well, all right, is the same technical package that shows up in the founding traditions of Egypt, except in Egypt, it's taught by Thoth or Thoth. Sumer, which is taught by Onanis or Apkallu, like I just said before, all right, and Mesoamerica. Okay, Quetzalcoatl. Remember we talked about Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica. He was a pre-flood person who came and taught all the people in South America all of the exact same things: metallurgy, weapons making, cosmetics, sorcery, astrology, the reading of the stars, astronomy, medicine, poison, all that different kind of stuff. That was Quetzalcoatl. Also, you have that exact same figure in India. And that guy's name is Saptarishi, who is the Indian Quetzalcoatl and the Indian Thoth from Egypt and the Indian 200 angels, like in the Book of Enoch. Okay. Same knowledge, same source pattern, same story of divine or semi-divine teachers who came from somewhere else. They just came from elsewhere. All right. So this is the episode where the angels and demons as UAP framing from episode 1 as well. We talked about the UAPs in episode 1 and how people speak in the language of their time. All right. comes back with full force in this sucker, which is all the stuff we're about ready to talk now. The Watchers descending from heaven and taking human form to interact with humanity is, in modern terms, exactly what UAP disclosure has been describing on the congressional record: non-human intelligences interacting with humanity. All right, same phenomenon, different vocabulary. Like we said, the vocabulary of our time. You know what I mean? All right. So let's get it rolling. There's a mountain on the border between what is now Lebanon, which is getting bombed to shit by Israel, Syria, and Israel. All right. Its summit is over 9,000 feet. Snow-covered peak for most of the year. Most of the time, the top of the mountain's covered in snow. Its name is Mount Hermon. All right. In the biblical tradition, it marks the northern boundary of the promised land. It's the northernmost boundary of what was the promised land. All right. According to a text called the First Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish document that was known and cited by Jesus's contemporaries, like we said, quoted in the New Testament in the book of Jude, and included in the canon of scripture used by first century Jewish and early Christian communities before it was excluded in the Council of Nicaea. Something happened on the summit of Mount Hermon that broke the world, basically, in their view. 200 angels descended there on that mountain. 200 angels. All right. They came down from heaven together as a group. They made a pact. They stood on the summit and they made a pact, an understanding, an agreement with one another. That's the folklore. All right. Before they took the next step, because they knew what they were about to do was going to have serious consequences with God and could not be undone at all once they made this decision. Okay. And so, quote, this is in the book of Enoch, and they were in all 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn a bond by themselves by mutual imprecations upon it, which was basically mutual, end quote, mutual effects for all. So they swore a bond that they were going to do this together. This decision that they were making, they knew for a fact that it was against God's will, and they decided to do it anyway. All right. So from the book of Enoch, that's on chapter 6, the angels swore themselves to each other before they descended, because what they were about to do was, in the text's own explicit words, was basically a rebellion. It was like a rebellion against the Creator. Okay. They came down and they took human wives. They came down and they took human wives. That was what they did. It was directly against, presumably, all instruction from what would have been the one true God, right? Or the Creator. All right. They also fathered children with them. They fathered children with them. Those children, according to the text, were giants. They were giants. They were called beings of enormous stature and violent appetites, beings who consumed the resources of the human world, and then, when there was nothing left, they began to consume each other and began to consume the humans who had welcomed them as well, according into the book. All right. And that was only the beginning, because the angels also taught the human beings things. They also taught them things. Fruit of the forbidden tree. They taught the humans things that they were not supposed to know at all. All right. They taught them the making of weapons, the working of metals, how to use dyes and cosmetics. This is an interesting one. The cosmetics one is interesting. Like, there's actually a specific angel who's attached to cosmetics, and it's basically like self-beautification. So the reason it's interesting to me, and they don't really talk about it in the book of Enoch, but you can kind of make that connection, is it's like if the angels came down and they mated with human women, right? And they had offspring with them as well, and they took them as wives. There was one of the angels taught the women how to do cosmetics, self-beautification. Isn't that kind of interesting? It's like, we're going to do this thing.
It is.
We're going to make this pact. All right. Where God is going to be really pissed off at us when we do this. Like, he's going to excommunicate us and probably kill us. So you got to look really pretty for us to do this. You gotta look really good. We got this angel over here. He's going to teach you eyeliner, mascara, lipstick, like whatever it is. Like, you need to get tan. Like, they're probably pretty tan, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of interesting because there was literally an angel that was like appointed to be the head of dyes and cosmetics, pretty much for women. All right. They also taught the reading of the stars, astronomy, like we said, the cutting of roots for medicine and for poison, and also the casting of spells, which I think is really, really interesting. You know what I mean? That kind of brings me back to the four yugas a little bit in Indian tradition, like, or you can go back to when humans might have had the ability to be more telepathic. You know what I mean? There's like that, like we're gonna talk about like
Right.
the telepathy tapes, which is just, yeah. If you're out there and you haven't listened to the telepathy tapes, please God, do yourself a favor. Listen to the telepathy tapes. Fucking listen to them. It's one of the most incredible things, investigations you'll ever listen to or be part of. It's just super cool. But anyway, the casting of spells, I think is pretty interesting. Side note, and like what that actually means. And something tells me there's going to be some psychedelics involved with that as well. You know what I mean? Also, on a side note of that, Joel, have you ever heard of the book, The Immortality Key, by a guy named Brian Montresquieu? Brian Montresquieu, I believe his name is. Have you ever heard that book? Heard of it?
It sounds familiar, like it's may have been spoken on in like some other things I've listened to, but I haven't myself.
Yeah, he was on
put
Rogan.
my hands on it.
He's been on Rogan a couple times. I read the book. It's incredible, dude. So he basically got permission from the Vatican, bro. The Vatican, to go into the Vatican and test all the ancient chalices and glasses and bowls and cups from basically Jesus' time, from Jerusalem, shit Jesus might have actually used himself. You know what I mean? Like as a human being in that area, like early Christian relics, like way before they called it Christianity, way before they used the cross as a symbol, way before, the Roman Empire embraced Christianity and said, piss off paganism, like the earliest Christian relics of Jesus' time there is. And the craziest thing about that, dude, is they almost all tested positive for psychedelics and for THC. Almost every single one he tested. Surprise.
Makes sense.
Surprise.
Makes sense.
Right?
Well,
there's a lot of ancient traditions,
like,
man. The mystery schools, like all that stuff we talked about. I mean, like, yeah, Jesus was probably using psychedelics, bro.
And to me,
and THC.
And Christianity or whatever it was back then was an empathetic faith. It wasn't about fucking killing people and shit like that. Like it was, and anybody who has done hallucinogenics and whether it was a journey or what, or that when you, and we spoke about this on other episodes, is like it makes you see the world differently. Normally you become a little more empathetic. Things that you used to carry really high, you realize were just kind of indoctrinated in you from something you had no control over, and you kind of drop some of those things. And it makes a lot of sense, especially when you talk about like Jesus Christians and turning the other cheek and help thy neighbor and all that stuff. Like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. There wasn't a bunch of pissed off alcoholics on nicotine drinking booze. They were trying to get along, and they were all fucking hippies trying to get along, I mean,
they're the original hippies.
In a realm.
I always call Jesus the original.
Yeah.
I always call Jesus the original hippie.
Yeah, for real.
And so, yeah, dude, 100%. 100%, dude. They were not eye for an eye. They were turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek. Those of you without sin cast the first stone. You know what I mean? That was very, very much right. Jesus. And we have completely missed that message, as especially American Christians, for the most part, not everybody, not all of them. But, if you're out there supporting this war and, what Israel's doing, just because Israel is mentioned in the Bible, like through the letters, then you're you're wildly missing the point. But anyway, the Immortality Key, dude, is if you're out there, read the goddamn Immortality Key. Super cool book, really insightful. It's not anti-religious. Okay. If you're a Christian out there, you can read it. Like, it's not going to challenge, it will challenge your faith based on the psychedelics and stuff like that. But when it comes to like all the other stuff he talks about, like he's not trying to say that the Christianity isn't real. You know what I mean? Or Jesus isn't Jesus, or God isn't God. That's not what the book is about at all. It's just about the truth, about that kind of stuff. And what those people 2,000 years ago in a place that is not the United States of America, for people that didn't speak English and didn't have our cultures and traditions, what they were actually doing, which would probably include Jesus himself, who also was not an Anglo-Saxon, blonde-haired, blue-eyed man. That's another thing. Okay. So the Book of Enoch, getting back into that, has a specific word for what the angels taught humanity. There's a very specific phrase in the Book of Enoch, and it's called forbidden knowledge. They taught humanity forbidden knowledge. Joel, it sounds exactly like fruit of the forbidden tree. It sounds exactly like that, except vastly expanded from Genesis. Vastly expanded from how it was discussed in Genesis. Okay. According to the Book of Enoch, humanity's rapid accession to civilization, to writing, metallurgy, organized warfare, to what we now call science, what we call science today, was not a slow upward climbing arc that modern, like anthropology, I should say, teaches. That's not what it was. It was a sudden catastrophic transfer of technology from non-human beings to human beings, according to the Book of Enoch. The Watchers are the fallen angels. Okay. The Watchers are the 200 fallen angels. The Watchers gave humanity knowledge humanity was not ready for, according to God and according to the Book of Enoch. And the earth filled with the giants of that union between the Watchers and human wives. And the violence of that knowledge became so corrupt that God decided to wipe it clean, which is when the flood came. All right. So the flood, according to the Book of Enoch, which was written down at least, well, a little over 2,000 years ago. I guarantee that oral traditions go on for thousands of years before that. There's probably writing that we haven't discovered that came before that, just like everything else. We just haven't found it yet. Which quotes traditions that were already ancient when it was written. Like we said, all these traditions before it was written down were already ancient. All right, was not primarily a punishment for human sin. It was a divine purge of a hybrid civilization, a civilization built on knowledge humans were not supposed to have. A civilization populated by beings also who were not human or not fully human, right? Which were the Nephilim, which were basically the offspring of the Watchers and the human wives, and the fallen angels themselves, which were the Watchers, okay? Which also raises the question, what if the ancient world remembered a civilization that was not fully human? What if it's a memory of a civilization that was not fully human? A civilization built on technology transferred from non-human beings, a civilization so advanced and so corrupt that the entire ancient world across every single culture, Joel, every single language, and every single continent preserved memory of its destruction as their founding story of why humans are the way they are today. Okay? Because it's not just the Book of Enoch. It's across all languages, all continents, all cultures, all civilizations. All right? So this episode 3 of this series on ancient history, the parts that they didn't teach you, the Watchers, the Nephilim, the Apkallu, and the possibility that the ancient world was telling us the truth about what came before the flood. All right. Now, the Book of Enoch and the Watchers. We'll start with the source text most listeners have never really read, because the Book of Enoch is not fringe. It's not conspiracy. It's one of the most important surviving Jewish texts from the Second Temple period of when that text was found. It's also quoted in the New Testament, like we said multiple times. It's considered scripture by the Ethiopian Orthodox Christians. It's considered scripture. That's why it's in the Ethiopian Bible, which is like the oldest sect of Christianity there is to this day, and preserved in fragments among that were in the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. All right. So what the Book of Enoch actually is, more precisely, the first Book of Enoch, or 1 Enoch, is a compilation of Jewish apocalyptic writings dated by mainstream scholarship to the 3rd or 2nd centuries BCE, which was the earliest surviving copy that we have. It was written in Aramaic and Hebrew. Like we said, Jesus most likely would have been speaking Aramaic during his time. Joel, can you check me on that? But I'm pretty damn sure that would have been the language of Jesus, was Aramaic, not Hebrew. All right, translated into Greek in antiquity and preserved in its complete form in the Ethiopian tradition, like we said, used by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. All right. The book is attributed to Enoch, who wrote it, the 7th patriarch from Adam in the Genesis genealogy. So if you look in the Genesis genealogy, if you look in the Old Testament, there's a genealogy in there, and it basically says all the descendants pretty much of Jesus going all the way back to Enoch. Now, Enoch is the 7th patriarch, according to mythology, from Adam. All right. Okay. Who walked with God.
You are
and he was
correct.
not.
He's
Okay.
Yeah, he spoke Aramaic. That was his given native tongue, specifically Galilean dialect spoken in first century Palestine.
Yep. That makes
Correct.
sense. And so for all of you out there that might not know that, Jesus spoke Aramaic. All right. Now, okay. So the seventh patriarch from Adam in the Genesis genealogy that you can see in Genesis today in any of your Bibles. All right. So supposedly he walked with God and he was not, for God took him. End quote. That is according to Genesis 5, verse 5, or chapter 5, verse 24. He did not die. All right. That's basically what they're saying. Enoch did not die. All right. He was basically translated or transitioned directly into the presence of God without going through death. So Enoch was basically pulled up from God to sit with him. That's how the Book of Enoch reads. All right. The Book of Enoch is presented as it's basically his testimony. It's his personal testimony of events he witnessed and like the angels he talked to, as well as God. All right. What he saw and learned during that entire time. All right. Aramaic fragments of the Book of Enoch were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, dating to, like we said, the 3rd or 2nd centuries BC. That's the earliest surviving copy we have, which confirms that the text, or at least major portions of it, were in wide circulation amongst Jewish communities during the Second Temple period, and exactly the era when Jesus was born and preached. Just like I talked about before, right? The Book of Enoch would not have been unknown to Jesus at all. It would have been something he talked about, something he spoke out with regularity. It was it would have been widely distributed amongst any literate members of like ancient Jewish society during that time. The New Testament book of Jude, verse 14, all right, quotes the Book of Enoch directly. The Apostle Jude, who is supposedly the brother of Jesus Christ, all right, Jude is considered by a lot of people to be the brother of Jesus, considered Enoch to be a genuine prophetic source, a genuine source of prophecy. In Jude, he talks about it, all right? The early Christian fathers, all right, treated the book with respect and in some cases as scripture for the first several centuries of Christianity. Like we said earlier, like about 15 minutes ago or whatever, up until the Council of Nicaea, the Book of Enoch was considered a normal text of scripture for the first several centuries of Christianity after Jesus' death and during Jesus' life and before, okay? Which means the Book of Enoch is not in origin a fringe conspiracy document, not at all. It is a mainstream Jewish text of the intertestamental period, read by early Christians as authoritative, quoted in the New Testament, and preserved through the transmission chains that also preserved the rest of the biblical canon itself. Up until the Council of Nicaea, it was widely distributed, widely cited, widely used. Okay? The Book of Watchers. The most important section in 1 Enoch for our purposes is called the Book of Watchers. Chapters 1 through 36. The Book of Watchers, chapters 1 through 36, is the oldest section of the compilation, dated by textual scholars, like we said, to at least the 3rd century BCE, possibly earlier. That's the part that was kind of found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. All right, the story. In the days of Jared, the father of Enoch, 200 angels called Watchers descended to the summit of Mount Hermon. Their leader was called Semjaza. His lieutenants included Azel, who taught weapons making, and Kokabiel, who taught the reading of the stars. He taught astronomy. All right. The Watchers had in the text been assigned to observe humanity. That's what their assignment was from God, to observe humanity, be there and observe humanity. All right. They obviously violated that mandate. They violated it. All right. What they did, they took human women as wives, fathered children with them. The children were the Nephilim, the giants, whose stature is described in the text as reaching 300 cubits, which is approximately 350 feet high. That's gigantic, if accurate, okay? But it's also not considered a literal measurement at the time either. At the time, apparently, there was a lot of exaggeration for things like that. And so it's almost more of a symbolic description. It seems to be more of like 10 to 12 feet, which is what we're finding out. Like, even if you think about like the giant of Kandahar, and Timothy Alberino just was on Rogan talking about the giant of Kandahar. I heard some weird stuff in passing that I never took seriously when I was, back in the day working for the agency and doing some stuff on that. But even the Native American traditions, they basically describe them as being 10 to 12 feet tall, having slightly red hair, being wildly powerful. I mean, incredibly powerful, like grizzly bears, basically. And so that seems to be more of what the actual tradition was, okay? But it captures something the ancient tradition insisted on. The beings were not merely large humans. There was something categorically different than large humans because they were hybrids, right? They would have been hybrids, half human, half angel, okay? The Book of Enoch specifies what the Watchers taught humanity. So within the Book of Enoch, it's very direct about what the Watchers specifically taught humanity, the forbidden knowledge we're talking about, the forbidden knowledge that obviously came from far more than eating an apple on a tree. All right. So Azazel taught humans how to make swords, how to make knives, how to make shields, how to make armor. He taught them metallurgy and the crafting of weapon systems for the day. He taught women the making of dyes, the wearing of ornaments, the use of cosmetics, like we said before. All right. And in the Texas phrase, the arts by which they, quote, led astray the holy ones, end quote. So basically, they taught them how to be hot. Taught them how to be hot and how to lead astray the holy ones, which are the angels, which were all the Watchers, aka the angels, aka the Watchers. All right. Now, another angel, Amazeric, taught the casting of spells and the cutting of roots, which is in the ancient vocabulary basically medicine and poison. Taught people how to make medicine, to heal themselves naturally, and also how to make poison. Okay, which poison could also be a medicine as well. Another angel called Armaros taught the resolution of enchantments or spells. All right, another angel, Baraquil, taught astrology as well. Kokobel taught the constellations. Ezekiel taught the signs of the clouds, whatever that is. I'm not sure what the signs of the clouds would be considered. Maybe that's weather. I bet that's what. Does that sound like weather to you? The signs of the clouds?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
Sounds
And
right.
if you also, Joel, if you got something, I know we're on a lag. If you got something, just pipe in and I'll hear it and I'll stop. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so
I got a lot more about the Book of Mary than I do the Book of Enoch. So I think
okay, well, let's do it in the Book of Mary. As soon as I
like
get
after
done.
Yeah.
As soon as I get done with the Book of Enoch,
after you
we'll
get
jump
done with
into
this, Okay.
Sounds good, bro. Araquel taught Ezekiel taught the signs of the clouds, which I think could be like a weather kind of thing, which you would really, really need if you were boating across the ocean or large bodies of water, right? That would be something you would really, really, really want to know. Would be weather patterns. All right. Araquel taught the signs of the earth. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun. And Sharel taught the signs of the moon. Okay. Which also had to do with the woman's cycle, which is directly related to basically the stages of the moon every month, which is another really, really interesting thing that goes way, 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 way back. All right. Really, really, really interesting. Okay. So the list of what was taught, like we said, weapons, metallurgy, cosmetics, basically pharmaceuticals, astronomy, the calendar. They taught the calendar, the reading of celestial signs, which is super interesting. What the Book of Enoch is describing is the transmission from non-human sources of the technological and scientific package on which every ancient civilization was pretty much subsequently built after that knowledge. All right, it was built on all this stuff. Metallurgy, that's what made the Bronze Age possible. Astronomy, that made agriculture and calendar making possible. weapons that make organized warfare and self-defense possible. Pharmaceutical stuff for both medicine and organized poisons made that possible for the first time. All right, so it's not a small claim. This is a huge, huge, huge claim, right? The Book of Enoch is telling us that the technological foundations of every ancient civilization that we know about were not developed by humans through gradual trial and error of thousands and thousands and thousands of years. They were given to humans by non-human beings, and that transmission was, according to the text, led to a catastrophe, which is the flood. All right, why the flood came, the Enoch version, why the flood came, okay? According to the Book of Enoch, the flood was not a punishment for human sin in the way most modern churches or Christians understand Genesis, right? Human sin. Humans were punished. They had to be killed because they were sinful. All right. That's not how the Book of Enoch describes it. All right. He describes it as a divine purge of the hybrid civilization that the Watchers had produced. So the reason the flood came wasn't to wipe out humanity. It was to wipe out the giants. All right. Or the Nephilim, which were the offspring of the Watchers and human wives. That's why the flood happened. Not because humans were sinful, was because of that. It was to wipe those people or those beings or those hybrids out. The archangels. You have Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. All right. Now, they looked down from heaven at what had happened to the earth, according to the Enochian tradition. They see the violence and the corruption, the blood being like basically all the blood and everything that was being shed by the giants is talking about the giants here. The oppression of humans by the giants, that the giants intentionally like oppressed human beings. The population of the human bloodline by hybrid offspring, basically saying that the human bloodline was being tarnished. And the teaching of forbidden knowledge that humanity was not supposed to possess. Humanity was not supposed to possess this kind of knowledge. So these are the archangels that were looking down, seeing all this stuff happen. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. All right. Then they appeal to God for judgment. They take their knowledge and they appeal to God for judgment. God agrees with them. He agrees with them. He commands the archangel Raphael to bind Azazel, all right, who's the chief of the Watchers who taught weapon making. So he went down there and basically like arrested him pretty much. And then he casted him into the desert. So the text basically says, cover his face that he may not see light. And there Azazel is to be imprisoned until the final day of judgment. So according to the Book of Enoch, this guy who's the head of the Watchers, or he's the chief of the Watchers who taught metal making and self-defense, is still imprisoned to this day, waiting for basically the second coming to happen. All right. God commands Gabriel to destroy the Nephilim, to destroy the giants, and set them against each other in war until they annihilate themselves and their line is ended. He wants their line, their genetic line, to be ended, to be ceased, to no longer exist on the earth. All right. And God commands Uriel to warn Noah. So in this tradition, there's still Noah in the Book of Enoch. Okay. He basically commands Uriel to warn Noah and tell him what is coming. So Uriel is the angel that tells Noah to build the ark, to instruct him to build it because the flood is coming to wipe the earth clean of the corruption the Watchers and their offspring have introduced, not because of the sins of man. Not because of the sins of man. All right. This reframes the flood a little bit, Joel. It reframes it. It is not in the Enochian tradition primarily about human moral failure. It's about the invasion of Earth by non-human intelligences and the divine response to that invasion. The flood is, in effect, a planetary quarantine, right? You can think about it like that. A reset button pressed to end an experiment that had gone horribly wrong because the Watchers came down and dicked everything up that was in God's plan, basically. All right. Now, why the Book of Enoch was excluded from the canon, from the biblical canon, like we kind of talked about earlier. All right. Despite being quoted in the New Testament and treated as scripture by early Christians, like we said, it was gradually excluded, gradually over time, from the biblical canon between the 2nd and 5th centuries CE. So around 200 years, it started around 200 years after Jesus died. All right. So 200 years after Jesus died, the Book of Enoch started to slowly get pushed away from what Christians were becoming. All right. Um, Here's some of the reasons. All right. Rabbinic Judaism. Rabbinic Judaism is one of the reasons. All right. Consolidating its canon after the destruction of the second temple in 70 CE. So the second temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. Right. Excluded Enoch. So basically, like, Judaism itself started to exclude Enoch a little bit. All right. The specific reasons given by the rabbis of the period included concerns about the text's detailed angelology. The text's detailed angelology, its willingness to name individual angels and describe their specific roles. They didn't like that. They thought it was too much information for regular people to have. All right. That's why the Jewish tradition started to turn its back on it. All right. Which was, like I said, bordering polytheism. So polytheism is the belief in many gods. Monotheism is the belief in a single God. And so Judaism, like, started to see, like, humans that were reading the Book of Enoch started to identify with a lot of these angels, right? Think about it. If you're a weapons maker, right? Let's say you're a blacksmith. If you're a blacksmith, what would stop you from worshiping the Anzizel god, who was basically the angel who taught humans metallurgy? Do you know what I'm saying? Do you see how that could happen? Or, like, let's say you're a medicine man or a medicine woman, like a doctor. What would stop you from worshiping this specific angel that taught humans pharmacy? Okay. They started to see that as a problem. It started to become polytheistic because people were starting to look at those specific angels and being like, I'm a blacksmith. That's my angel. That's my God. I'm a pharmacist. That's my angel. That's my God. So they didn't like that. It was too polytheistic. Okay. So, basically, pretty much starting in the 2nd century CE, like I said, they started to move away from that in the Jewish tradition. They started to a little bit after the burning of the temple in 70 CE, but really 200 years after that was really started happening. All right. The emerging Christian canon in the 3rd and 4th century CE gradually followed they followed what was called the rabbinic decision. The rabbinic decision. So, Joel, it's not just that like what you're thinking about the Council of Nicaea and the guys that were involved in that, the early church fathers. All right. One example of this is Anatharius of Alexandria. Anatharius of Alexandria was one of the original church founders who was in the Council of Nicaea. Anatharius of Alexandria. All right. And he was one of the guys that apparently was really prominent in including basically the rabbinic Judaism tradition, where he didn't like the idea of the angels having so much power. It was too polytheistic. It was not monotheistic enough. And so they basically, when they did the canon, when they put together the Bible or had the accepted books of the Bible for, in the Council of Nicaea, which there was other stuff that happened there as well, but that was what he cited is why it should be excluded. Does that make sense? It wasn't because they necessarily, like those church fathers personally believed it, but they saw the ancient rabbinic Judaism tradition where they were like, yeah, we agree with you. The angels are getting too much power. The angels are receiving too much power for what they did, according to the Book of Enoch. Pretty wild.
All
right. The stated theological reasons, the text angelology was seen as too speculative. The idea that angels could physically procreate with humans was a difficult thing for people to understand, right? If you wouldn't have seen it and been there and like understood it. The direct citation of specific angels by name and the elaboration of their individual role was seen as opening the door, like again, to polytheistic interpretation of what is supposed to be a monotheistic single God religion. All right. That is the stated theological reasons. The unstated reasons, which we can kind of infer from the timing and the political text, are that the Book of Enoch tells a story that undermines the emerging institutional interpretation of Christianity, just like you said, Joel. Okay. that undermines the emerging institutional interpretation of what Christianity was becoming hundreds and hundreds of years after Jesus was killed. If human civilization was corrupted from its beginning by the transmission of forbidden knowledge from non-human beings, then human institutional religion is basically compromised at its root. It's compromised at its root. If the flood was a divine reset because of that corruption, then the entire post-flood world, including the institutional church, is operating on knowledge that technically was never supposed to be here to begin with, including the church. All right? The Book of Enoch, taken seriously, is basically subversive of institutional religion in ways other scriptural texts are not, for sure. You know what I mean? It's way easier to say, Joel, that Eve, the woman, dicked up, disobeyed God, disobeyed Adam, disobeyed her husband, ate an apple from the forbidden tree, and gained all this knowledge that the Book of Enoch said actually came from all the Watchers, which were the fallen angels. It's way easier, right? To build your original, because these are original traditions, bro. These are original traditions of the Jewish and Christian faith, right? It's way harder to grapple with. It's way harder to grapple with all those angels and what all those angels had the power to do, man. That's another thing. I mean, God, like the way that Christians or, the Jewish faith sees God or Yahweh, it's an all power. Like, how could you possibly exist long enough on this earth to disobey God so badly, so horribly as the Watchers did, and be able to have families and exist and have it last for so long that you literally change humanity's knowledge platform. And then your children become giants that are so self-destructive over such an extended period of time that God has no choice but to do a flood to wipe it clean. It's not like if he was the same powerful God that we think today, why would he just give them all heart attacks? Why wouldn't he just kill them all on the spot?
Right.
You know what I mean? It kind of takes away from the power of God a little bit, don't you think?
Well, I think it takes away from the power of God and gives some of our greatest gifts as far as technology at the time to somebody else who wasn't God. Like, it didn't come from a holy place. Like, it came from somebody who was, one was going against God's will. And so I think there's a lot of problems with it. And it's the same thing with the Book of Mary, is it doesn't fit the narrative of the story. So they decide to not include it in the Bible, because it doesn't fit the control. It doesn't fit, every consolidation of Christianity was at a time when they were trying to control and turn Christianity into governance. And it's just happened time and time again, and it goes against that whole narrative. Like, if you're not worshiping one person, if you're looking at females equal to males, like, it goes against the whole narrative of Christianity.
Yeah, for sure. And another really interesting thing, like for the Ethiopian church, like the Ethiopian Christian church, they teach the Book of Enoch. Like, this is their doctrine, dude. It's not heresy, it's scripture for them. Right. Like, if you go to Ethiopia and you go into an Ethiopian church, they're going to talk about the Book of Enoch as if it's Genesis. Isn't that? And it's crazy because they're Christians. You know what I mean? But it's like, it would be so foreign to American Christians, or any Christians anyway, really, that aren't Ethiopian Christians, to go in there and sit in that church and realize that that's not heresy. Like the Book of Enoch is not considered heresy. And it's one of the oldest sects of Christianity in the history of forever. Maybe, it might be the oldest organized form that there is. And it's just interesting how they would talk about the Watchers, and they still talk about those angels. Like, they still talk about all those fallen angels and the fact that those fallen angels taught humanity all that forbidden knowledge. Not that it came from the fruit of the forbidden tree. Well, that it came from the Watchers.
Well, and the fact that, like, Christianity, like, in Ethiopia, like there's so many ties that go back to Ethiopia. There's long been speculation that the Holy Grail is somewhere in Ethiopia if it exists. Like there's
Yep.
like some of the
Graham
oldest
Hancock's doing a
ties of
big thing on that
Christianity
right
go
now.
back to Ethiopia. Yeah, it goes back to Ethiopia, and it's kind of funny because that type of Christianity isn't anywhere close to what American Christianity is right now, you know? And it's like people don't even know what they're worshiping and the history behind it. They just blindly follow it. And I guess that's faith, but I also think that's kind
Yeah.
of fucking retarded.
Jesus, Joel. God, you're so
Yeah.
raw and just aggressive.
You see
Hey,
that?
dude, you know what I was thinking? Oh, you got it. You did it. Hey, I mean, as a matter of
Did it.
fact, I feel like I don't want to be the one explaining what that is. I feel like that should totally, as a matter of fact, so hey, Joel, we're an hour and a half in right now. Hour and a half. I want to put 2 episodes
Yeah.
out this week because we've been, and for all of you guys out there that are still sticking with us, man, we appreciate it. It's summer. Like I went to Montana for Ranger reunion. Like we've just been buco busy. You know what I'm saying? Joel's had stuff going on. He's buying a house. Like he's going back and forth and, you know, selling houses, buying houses, moving stuff, working still his regular job. It's been a kind of a lull in the storm. I mean, we would get back to 1 or 2 a week for sure, you know, coming up, but it's been kind of like stormy out there.
Yeah.
We've been really, really busy with this shit, but we got school starting soon, which will help a lot. But I was just thinking, I was like, since we're an hour and a half in, like I got enough here to get us 2.5 hours for sure. I think it's going to be too long. And so what I'm thinking is we'll start with the Sumerians, the Sumerian parallel and the global pattern that mimics the Book of Enoch. I think it would be a good idea to do it maybe Thursday or something, or Wednesday, whatever day we do the next one.
Yeah,
we can kind of just bullshit for the next.
Let's do that and talk about, and I'll talk about a little bit about the Book of Mary because it doesn't have as much as
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
History.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good thing. But what I was leading into, so I got an upside down cross on my neck, and that's gonna probably make a whole bunch of people look at me funny. And I did it way more for a conversation starter and a little bit of like to make a Christian look at me and be like, what the fuck is this? Because one, the upside down cross was never a negative thing in Christianity. It was a sign of Saint Peter before essentially like movies 100%. And pop culture changed the upside down cross into this anti-Christian thing.
An upside down cross.
Yeah, well, and that's and why it was a symbol of Saint Peter, because he didn't think he was worthy to be hung like Jesus was. So he said he wanted the cross upside down. So I think part of this is just to play with Christians because they're going to come at me and act like I'm a Satan worshiper. And I'm going to be like, do you even know anything about the own religion that you worship? Like, actually, this is a Christian symbol. It's a sign for Saint Peter. And 2, 1, I'm not, Saint Peter wasn't one of my favorite saints. I don't have anything against Peter. I was more of a Matthew guy. But like within the realm of, I just got to
say this really quick. Matthew has an interesting tradition. I want you to fact check me while I'm saying this. But I think out of the 4 Gospels, is I've read mostly all the Bible. It's a really interesting read for a lot of different reasons. The Old Testament for history, like straight up history, because there's a lot of actually come to find out real history in the Old Testament that's truly, truly ancient. And there's also stuff like, you know, Cyrus the Great, right? There's a bunch of historical figures that really did a lot of cool shit and terrible shit and like all that stuff. But what the hell was I getting at with that? God damn it. I just lost my entire train of thought.
Saint Matthew.
Oh yeah, Matthew.
You wanted to say something about
Mark, Luke, John with the Gospels. And so in the Matthew Gospel, and there's 4 Gospels, and they kind of like, you know, they don't mirror each other exactly, right? But in the book of Matthew, I'm pretty sure, bro, at the end of it, it's like zombie land in Jerusalem. At the very end of the book of Matthew, I'm pretty sure it quotes basically saying when Jesus died, when he died on the cross, that there was like the earth rumbled, there was like massive rumblings, like thunder, earthquakes. and that the dead rose and walked the streets of Jerusalem. Check that for me, Joel, because one of the Gospels says that, and I'm pretty sure it's Matthew.
So Gospel 2751-53, I don't know how you're supposed to say that, describes an unusual event
Chapter
where
and
an
verse.
earthquake
But it's
splits
Matthew,
rocks,
right?
tombs. Okay. Yeah. Tombs open, bodies of many holy people rise and walk into Jerusalem after Jesus' resurrection. While modern readers compare this to a zombie movie, theologians view them as resurrected holy figures and not undead corpses. So yes and no. They were essentially resurrected.
That's such an interesting.
And
that's the only gospel. That's the only place anywhere. Like, Josephus is an ancient, kind of one of the original historians, Jewish historians, and he documented the fall of Jerusalem. For example, in 70 AD, when the Romans just mass murdered all the Jews in Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. But it's kind of like, that is such an interesting. I've read that a bunch of times trying to figure out, like, on a modern, like, what do you mean by, is that literal? Because I feel like, if there was people resurrected from the dead, holy people, holy or not holy, whatever, and they're walking through the streets of Jerusalem, I feel like that would be one of those things where it was like the feeding of the 5,000, right? Like, there's a lot of verification with that because there's a shit ton of witnesses, and that's in every story. It's in every gospel and all that kind of stuff. Right. It's like, that one has always been really interesting to me, like, on what Matthew was getting to there with talking about, like, basically, it wasn't just Jesus that got resurrected. It was like all of these other dead people, and they were just walking the streets of Jerusalem. Anyway, that's kind of besides the point, but I'll let you get back to the Book of Mary. I just wanted to kind of caveat that with a side note when you were talking about Matthew, because I've always been really interested in Matthew because of that. Well, of what that really meant,
Well, and not back to the Book of Mary, but back to the tattoo. I mainly got it to challenge Christians to see if they know anything about the own faith they believe in. And I know there's a lot of Christians out there that do. I'm not satanic. I'm not fucking anything. It was, and I'm not a Christian either. This isn't because of St. Peter. Like, I got it as a conversation starter. I see crosses behind ears all the time, and I said I'm going to tip one upside down to freak fucking white Christians out. And that's kind of why I got it. And if they want to have a conversation about it, I'd love to do it. I'd love to have one. Especially moving back to South Route. It'll be pretty interesting.
Oh, I want to be there. It's going to be a conversation starter.
You will.
For sure, dude. Actually, I take that back, dude. I think what it's going to be, I think there's going to be a lot of people talking behind your back. I think there'll be a few people that have the balls, the chutzpah to engage you. And I hope that they do, you know what I mean? In like a intelligent way, not just challenge you to a fight, but like, for the people that are actually willing to talk about it, it could be really, really, really freaking interesting. I'll tell you that. But I want to hang out with you, dude. I want to have some dinner at the Antlers here in Yampa. I want to go to the Antlers with you. We're going to have dinner. And I want you to make sure you sit on the side of the booth where your ear is exposed. I just want to be there, bro.
Let's do it.
I want to be there. I'm really curious about it. Because I think we could have some really good conversations, and we would surprise the hell out of people.
Well, and I think most people will see it and will jump to some pretty quick conclusions, and it'll be fun to, whatever. I'm a contrarian. I like to challenge people. I don't like the movement where, like, white Christian nationalism has gone in the last 10 years. So if I could do something to make people think about their faith and how they view it, I'd love to do it. So,
yeah, you know what? That's what we're doing here, dude. Like, we're doing that every time we put out something, every time we do a short, and those shorts, especially on Instagram, especially if they have anything to do with religion, they just go through the roof. It's crazy how, it's just, and then, like, don't comment, don't get in there. Just like Rogan talks about, right? Like, post and ghost.
Oh, I won't.
Dude, it's wild listening, like, reading the comments from people from, like, Syria, Jordan. Like, there's people commenting, dude, that are in Iraq. You have people from France and, like, Holland and Canada and the United States and, like, Mexico. And, dude, it's like, you really can see, it's like, and you read it and you're like, and you read all this stuff and you're like, God, like, every single one of these people think they're right. Every single one of these people think they got it figured out.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like their truth is
yeah,
the right truth. That's what I noticed more than anything.
yeah. Well, and it's funny too, and how quickly it gets nasty too. Like, you know, how many times we've been called
Nasty.
idiots, or
Real
people
nasty.
calling us idiots and not listening to a whole podcast. And there's a bunch of things on that podcast that they would agree with and we talk about, but they catch the short and they're
100%.
like, actually,
Yep,
we agree
100%.
with what you're saying, but you're just catching a short vibe of it. Yeah, it's weird. So my parents haven't
The good
left
thing
yet,
is
but
they
they're
had a lot of
just
people sending
leaving.
messages
So
asking about the podcast, you know, because it's like that's the long form, right? And so you put out those little 90-second
that's what we
shorts,
want them to
and,
see.
and kind of like it's meant, yeah, and it's meant to inflame. It's meant to engage. You know what I mean? Like that's the reason you put it out. And it's like it's meant so you can start thinking critically and have some debate and some dialogue. And I like the idea of people. I think we need that in our society a lot. People have been so scared. People have been thwarted by our government and by whatever the majority party is at the time to not express their views. You know what I mean? Under threat of cancellation, under threat of imprisonment, possibly with the Israel thing, you know, or even like COVID. I go back to COVID. And it's like, you know, you had people talking about going into camps, like herding people that were not vaccinated up and putting them in camps and talking about it openly, like it was just fine to do that, like a Japanese internment camp, you know? I mean, so it's like, it's good to see, like, I love this debate and conversation and independent thought and decision making and being like, hey, where's your source, bro? Where'd you come? Is that just something you thought of in your own brain, or is that a sourced piece of material you're talking about? You know? That's the stuff that I'll engage.
Yeah, well, and I just want to make people think. I've been passionate about things and have been proven wrong. And one, it's part of growth, it's part of learning, you know, like change your fucking mind, get the information. It's okay to realize that some of your ideologies or some of your thought processes that you based your whole life on were just that. They were just ideologies. They weren't anything else besides thoughts that were put together by a group of people and pushed down your throat. You know, make up your own mind.
Yep, make up your own mind, people. Make up on information. You know what I mean? Like that's. I think it got like these long held belief structures aren't, like we said, aren't serving us, dude. Like politically for sure, and it's not serving us on the street either, man. And it's amazing if you actually can get some dialogue with people and talk to people, like what happened during the Charlie Kirk thing when I was sitting in front of the courthouse, and over half the people that came up and talked to me like did not, you know, they showed up thinking that I was going to disagree with everything they were going to say. And they come to find out we agreed on about 50-50. You know what I mean? And like, that's the good stuff, dude. That's the good stuff. Whether you're talking about religion, politics, like the Second Amendment, fucking, you know, it doesn't matter. Like Israel, warfare, you know, Bush versus Obama, whatever it is. It's like, you actually sit down and have a conversation with somebody, dude. It's like, I see this with my kids, with like my daughters have phones. And when I was a kid, dude, I was like 13. When I was a 13-year-old boy, 12-year-old boy, dude, I was scared to death to talk to girls. Scared to death to talk to girls. You know what I mean? And like I'm starting to see, because we have like park phones and they're, you know, they're monitored and shit. But they have friends like, you know, that are males that are in their class that they hang out with, and I see the texts and stuff, especially if there's anything bad. And I think back when I was like 12 or 13, dude, it's like, it took me a long time to learn how to talk to a girl, you know, and not be scared, like freaked out about it. You know what I mean? And like stutter over myself, you know, have anything at all to say and not be like hyperventilating, right? Especially if you're talking to a girl that's pretty that you're like into. And dude, I'm seeing like, we're seeing it. This is a kind of a microcosm of it, of our society as a whole. But it's like, I'm seeing these 12, 13-year-old boys say shit to girls on these text messages threads that they would never, ever, 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 ever say in person. Ever. 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 You know what I mean? Ever. They wouldn't have the balls to do it. Like, they would think better about it. They'd be worried they were getting in trouble, stuff like that. And it's like our society has been like social media and like a lot of this stuff. And we've shielded ourselves intentionally from what it's like to actually have a face-to-face conversation with somebody and what those outcomes really mean.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
100%.
And it's like, I
You
can see
don't.
that in everything
There's
from
no consequences behind a
big
computer.
media all the way down to my girls texting people that I want to rip the heads off of. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like,
Yeah.
it's good that, dude, that if it takes an upside down cross on your neck to start some conversations and people look at you a little bit differently and maybe open up somebody's eyes, dude, so be it, man. And also, like we said, St. Peter was intentionally did that on his own, said, crucify me. I do not deserve to be crucified like
Right.
Jesus. I do not deserve to
Right.
go out the way he went. I will go upside down. Yep. That took a lot
And
of
with
balls,
that being
by the way,
said,
too.
I'm a grown ass man, and I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want. So if they don't like it, they could all eat a
America.
dick as well.
Damn it. That too.
Mm-hmm.
That too, man.
Exactly.
That too. All right, dude.
Right.
And yeah, bro. Hey, man, I love you, dude. We're an hour 40 minutes in. Long live the Republic, baby. And
Sweet.
I really think,
Love
you know,
it.
not promoting anything, but violence might be the answer. We'll see. To something.
I mean, if anything, we've learned in the last 20 years that politics is not the answer because nothing has gotten done and we've just gotten
Definitely
shit
not.
on. So maybe there's
Yep.
I'm not for anyone ever promoting violence to another person unless you're getting punched in the face and you have to defend yourself. But go cut down a fucking flock camera. I don't give a fuck. Run your car, get all drunk and drive right through a flock camera if it makes you feel better. Like, I don't give a fuck. Like, fuck all that shit, dude.
Yeah, and there may or may not be a substance that you can spray on your license plate that may or may not be reflective, that may or may not hinder the ability of a flock camera to take a picture of your license plate. And there may or may not
and
be
you may
other
or may not be able to
available that can do something like that. There may or may not be out there. You just have to, it's an open market. You know, you might be surprised what you find.
And it may or may not be a $8 can of Rust-Oleum clear coat or very similar to Rust-Oleum clear coat. But yes, exactly.
Yeah, man.
And if you like getting watched by your government, keep voting these fuckers in.
Yep. Yeah, baby. All right, man. Love you, brother. We'll talk soon. Get another one of these suckers out in the second half of my
we'll talk
out here, dude. Yep.